Hello, and once again, welcome to Ballin with Roy and Edwyn. I am Roy S. Johnson, and this is my son, Edwyn. What's up, E?
What's up? How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. So let's get right into it. A lot of stuff going on this week, a lot of different leagues. Let's start out by giving a shout out to the Los Angeles Lakers for retiring the number 99 jersey of George Mikan, one of the great NBA centers of all time, of course, in an era way before me, way before you. But I think it's great that they're recognizing and giving flowers to Mike. And he died in 2005, but has clearly remained one of the great Lakers centers when they played in Minnesota. They were the Minnesota Lakers. Do you have any not recollection, but what are your thoughts when you think about players from that era, particularly like George Mikan?
George Michael's up there with Wilt Chamberlain or the late Bill Russell, who just passed recently. He's from that era, where Phil Jackson, Jerry West, all of those guys together. So, I mean, his jersey should have been retired a long time ago, since clearly he passed in 2005. I mean, I'm glad they're doing it now. I think this was overdue.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that a lot of players from other eras don't get recognized, don't get remembered, because there were a lot of great players of that era, both centers, guards, forwards, that have often forgotten. So it's great that the NBA is doing this, or that the Lakers are doing this, and hopefully more players from that era will also get recognized, so that they can at least continue to be in the minds of fans of the game, and don't just think that the game started with maybe Magic and Bird, etc. So kudos to the Lakers for that. And let's have some fun with the Lakers. The Lakers did this amazing trip, a reunion in Hawaii of the great Showtime teams. You had everybody from Pat Riley to Magic Johnson to who else? James Worthy. You had Coop in Hawaii. And I love the picture that they put in the stands. The team shot, all the geezers in the stands. What did you think? I mean, this was something that you wanted to talk about today. What did you think when you saw that they had that reunion with the Lakers?
It's just paying homage to greatness. It's paying homage to, honestly, one of the greatest teams of all time. And everybody's going to continue to have this debate over the greatest team of all time, whether it be the Showtime Lakers, whether it be Kobe or Shaq's Lakers, whether it's Warriors, obviously, whoever, the Celtics, the list goes on, Bulls, but they're one of the great teams. So right now, everybody's talking about Golden State. Everybody's talking about Steph, or the Warriors a couple of years ago, too, winning the championships. But I think this is just a reminder, too, of, you could say, a super team, but a super team grown internally, naturally, too, with the greatest point guard of all time, the greatest scorer of all time, until LeBron eclipses him. You talk about players like James Worthy and Byron Scott and Pat Riley being one of the greatest coaches of all time. So I think it's just a reminder, but it's just great for that to be posted and just to pay homage to for that. Also, especially for like the younger viewers, people who are younger than me, that really either don't know little to or not anything at all about them.
It was a lot of great video that came out of that reunion, but the best photo was the one of 75-year-old Kareem Abdul-Jabbar throwing up the sky hook. And I love in the background Magic expression on Magic's face, like, go ahead, big fella, take the shot. Kareem, as you know, is one of the greatest sportsmen of this era, a writer, a producer, just a man of great intelligence and spirit. And to see him out there at 75, I can't wait. I got about a decade or so before I can show what I can do at 75. But I'm looking forward to that. But I just love the fact that they did this. And who knows, maybe the Celtics will do it. Who else? The Houston Rockets, they could have a great reunion team. There's a lot of great teams that could get together and do this. I think it was a great idea, and hopefully others will follow suit. So let's close out this NBA segment. The biggest story, for better or worse, over the last couple of weeks was the year-long suspension for the entire season of Celtics coach Ime Udoka. The Celtics did say, and we always have to be careful because of what we know and what people are speculating, was because he had a consensual relationship with a female member of the staff. He broke team rules. When I first heard about this before the suspension, I thought he would get suspended. I was stunned when it was an entire year. So it must have been something that's just so egregious to merit this. There clearly will be more coming out later at some juncture. The Celtics did not say whether he would return to the bench after a year. It's hard to imagine that he would after a year. So this was just a shock to a lot of people. Very unfortunate situation on many levels, on a personal level, in terms of his relationship. It's on a professional level regarding the team, and just it's another man showing a weakness that cost him dearly, cost him significantly. They didn't say whether he is being suspended without pay, so I haven't heard that. But I imagine he's not going to get his full pay. Most of the time, as you know, when players or coaches are suspended, they lose pay for whatever segment of time they're suspended. So this it's already very costly for him, could be significantly costly for him. And what is your perspective on what transpired?
Well, most likely he will go without a full salary or the possibility of getting an extension. He was given 3 choices: either to resign, be fired, or the year suspension. Now, after this, there might be a good chance he does not come back. There is that strong possibility. Whether that is his choice or not, he chooses to resign, whatever the case may be. So that's a chance he might not come back. Now we're talking about 2 adults wanting to be in a consensual, whatever you want to call it, affair, etc., whatever you want to call it. In this day and age, it's not the same as back when you first were on the scene. This was a little bit more common, and I think a lot of people did not even think about the possibility of it getting out or this type of repercussions, whatever the case may be. This is against team policy, team rules. Do I think it is equivalent to a year suspension? No, I don't. Compared to Ron Artest going in the stands, getting suspended for a year, I don't think it's equivalent to that. No. Are you trying to make an example off of what happens when you break team rules? Yes, I get that part too. Now, maybe they know things that we don't know that aren't out there. There might be more to it. And the picture that they showed of the woman, that's not even the picture. That's not even her. So that's another thing right there too. You're putting out false information. That's not even the lady. So you're bringing more people into it that aren't even involved in the situation. And we don't know him and Nia Long's marriage. You don't know any details. Don't just say that because it's Nia Long, oh, I wouldn't have did this, I wouldn't have that. We don't know. When you're in that moment, you're not thinking about that.
Yeah, there are times when social media is just a cesspool, and this was one of them. And please encourage people to just not speculate anymore about this, to not share things that they aren't 100% certain of. And it's unfortunate for everyone. It's particularly unfortunate for the women who work for the Celtics, and names were being thrown about. It's a very difficult time for them. And so, yes, just please, everybody keep their speculation to themselves and not put it out on social media. So best of luck to everyone in this very, very unfortunate situation. All right, let's go to Major League Baseball. I know this is not your main sport.
Yeah.
I grew up playing baseball, watched it when I was a kid. For many African Americans of my parents' generation, baseball was their favorite sport. So I was kind of in that in-between generation. I watched baseball, played baseball. My parents were Dodger fans like all African Americans in that era. I was a St. Louis Cardinal fan, primarily because the Cardinals were the Tulsa Oilers. Tulsa Oilers was the Cardinals AAA farm team. Plus the Cardinals, like the Dodgers, were one of the first teams to have not just one black player, but multiple black players. Lou Brock, Bob Gibson, Kurt Flood, all great players of the era were playing for St. Louis. And my dad used to take myself and my brother, we'd drive to St. Louis from Tulsa at least once during the year and go to a game. So, baseball is in my blood a little bit. So I just want to recognize Albert Pujols, clearly a future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players of all time, who just recently joined the 700 Club. When it's baseball, it's all about the long ball. That's what everybody enjoys. And so he joins this very, very elite club of only 4 people who have hit 700 home runs. And then, of course, Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds are in that group. And so you just want to recognize him. He's enjoying his last season, came back to St. Louis to where he had the best years of his career. To see him be able to celebrate and accomplish this is a great thing. And then you talk about the most dominant player right now, one of the most dominant players right now, Aaron Judge of the Yankees. He's like Paul Bunyan with a bat. This man is 6'7" tall, and baseball is now on the Aaron Judge watch. He has hit 60 home runs so far this season. ESPN is cutting in every time he goes to bat to see if he can hit 61 home runs to set the American League mark by Roger Maris. Of course, the Major League mark is held by Barry Bonds, 73 home runs. But it's great to see both of these players, one in their prime, another past their prime, but both sharing the spotlight in these last weeks of the Major League Baseball season before we go into the playoffs. So far, as we are taping this, Judge, let's see, since he hit the last home run, since he hit 60, is 4 for 15 with 3 doubles, 6 walks, and 6 strikeouts. So not doing too badly, and I think he's going to get it before the end of the season. All right, let's go to college football. Crazy weekend, some close games, some upsets. I'm in mourning here because of my 2 teams. But let's start out with this. Who's really number 1? Georgia is clearly number 1 in the polls. But man, they struggled with Kent State, winning 39-22. But as you watch that game and watch that score unfold, this was not a 17-point gap. I mean, it was really until towards the end of that game that they pulled away. In the meantime, number 2 Alabama just rolled over Vanderbilt 55-3, exactly what they were supposed to do. I think they were favored by 150 points or something crazy like that. So as you look at these 2 teams right now, which one of them you think is number 1? And what's on the Edwyn poll, on the Edwyn ranking, who's number 1?
I think Alabama is number 1. They beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has been the worst team in the SEC for the last 10 to 15 years. So you knew this was going to be that. Now you got to remember, they beat Texas by 1 point. So you roll back to that, and then obviously they slaughtered Utah State, I think 55-0. So it's still the beginning of the season, but now you're in SEC play. Next week they're playing Arkansas. That's going to be a bigger game. And then I think after that they play Texas A&M. That's going to be a very big game. I don't know who Georgia has next, but I know when they play Auburn, that's a rivalry game. They're going to kill Auburn. Like I said, Auburn's not that good this year. Florida's going to be a rivalry game. And then talking about Tennessee, which both Alabama and Georgia play. And then Tennessee, they just whipped Florida this past weekend too. That was a really good game too. So I as an Alabama fan, I will say Alabama. Georgia still is not that far behind. I think when you lose to inferior teams like this, there's clearly a lot of things that you still have to work on, but you still have time. Both of those teams, I believe, are going to go undefeated until the SEC championship, where they're going to play for that. And whoever loses, I think, is going to fall back into the top 4, which has been happening the last couple of years. So you're still going to probably most likely have those 2 teams in the playoffs, with whether it's going to be Clemson or Ohio State, possibly.
Well, let's talk about Ohio State. Yeah. I mean, they've been pretty impressive. I mean, they had a great win over Wisconsin, 52-21, very solid win. Do they deserve to be edged up into that top 3, or are they just going to have to bide their time at number 3 and get in the playoffs and prove that they're a championship team from there?
As of right now, it really goes about biding your time along, because right now they did beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin is that was a physical game. It's a Big Ten physical game when you're talking about a team that likes to run I formation, fullback, tight ends. They love to run it. They love the front seven with their defense. But Ohio State was the better team, not just ranking wise, but just even with personnel and everything else. They were the better team. But then you're talking about Michigan game. You're talking about Michigan State, Penn State, Iowa next week. So or I think no, I'm sorry. I think Michigan plays Iowa next week. But those teams right there, so you have to still wait because they could be 3, 4, 5, and they fall out later on the top 10. So it's still a long season for them. But do they deserve it? Yeah. But it's still at least another big 5 weeks that you still have to wait on. So
I don't know if it's great or horrible for college football, but you got the 2 SEC teams on one hand, you got the 2 Big Ten teams. Clearly, they are all moving towards meeting each other, so there will be a shakeout after that. Ohio State and Michigan should be a great game this year if things continue to evolve the way they are. And then there's number 5, Clemson. Could Clemson be left out, and maybe should they be left out of the playoffs? I mean, it's real early, of course, but they struggled, to 51 to 45. They gave up 45 points to Wake Forest this week. How can you still rank them at number 5? So Clemson, I don't know. I think they've kind of been exposed, and I don't know how long they're going to be able to remain in the rankings, and they may not even make the playoffs.
Well, I'll give Wake Forest some credit. Wake Forest is not that bad of a team. It's early in the season. They were 3-0 up until then. They clearly can still do something. I think they're still going to be in the top 25. So they're not that bad of a team.
Yeah, they're not terrible. They're not terrible. Put it that way.
But when it just comes to the ACC, you're talking about, okay, Pittsburgh, Virginia, it's not all that. I mean, even especially Miami just lost to Middle Tennessee this week, which was one of the biggest upsets for the week too. I think Clemson, I don't think they'll be in the playoffs come the end of the season. Being in 4, 5, or 6, I think they're going to stay somewhere in that. When they do play Notre Dame, I believe they're going to win that game. That's going to be a big game, despite Notre Dame not being as good as we thought or now just being out there. But they still have a long schedule. I think they're going to miss it by at least one spot.
Okay. All right. So before we leave college football, as I mentioned, I'm in mourning. Have to show you this actual shot of me watching OU lose to Kansas State. With just a horrible 41-34 game. They were number 6, so they clearly dropped in the polls. This may be the type of game that knocks them out of any playoff contention. Most other teams just don't have the margin for error that the SEC and Big Ten teams have. So it was a tough Saturday for your dad. But I hang in there. I'll stay loyal to my teams, and we'll see how they play out for the rest of the season. All right, let's go to the NFL. What a great weekend for it just being week 3, right? First thing got to say is the teams that were 0-2. It was good to see them pull it together and get a win. Nobody wants to go 0-3. Not that 0-3 knocks you out of the playoffs, but it's a pretty big hole to dig out of. So you had Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Carolina, and Tennessee all getting their first wins. I know Tennessee is one of your favorite teams. I like Carolina because of Christian McCaffrey. So tell me about those teams. Does any one of them have a chance to kind of bubble up and get into the playoffs?
I think Tennessee's going to make the playoffs. That they are still a good team, very capable. Their best player is the big guy, Derrick Henry. They lost to Buffalo, I think, the week before that because they simply were able to stop him from going downhill. He had to stop his feet. So they were able to do something that most teams cannot do, even though Buffalo just lost to Miami. I think they're definitely the best team out of all of them. Cincinnati, honestly, I think Cincinnati's still going to go to the AFC Championship. They're going to come close to going back to the Super Bowl, but they're going to come short of it this year. I think Carolina, they'll win a few more games. The possibility of a wild card is there for them. But you talking about the other teams in the NFC South. They beat who they beat? They beat New Orleans?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so they beat New Orleans, but then you're talking about Falcons. Tampa, I understand Tampa just lost. They have all those injuries. But no, I think they're 7, maybe they win 7 games, possibly 8. And I give Baker all the credit in the world for the way he played yesterday. If Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy, there's definitely a lot of possibilities for them.
Yeah, I think the 0-2 teams were a little bit of an aberration. I think many of them have the opportunity to still make the playoffs. But of course, the biggest surprise in the NFL so far this season has got to be the Miami Dolphins. 3-0 yesterday after just this great win over Buffalo. Who knew that game was going to shape up to be the way it was? Of course, it came down to the last second. Give me your take on Tua. What's happening with the Dolphins and why are they so much better? Why are they the biggest surprise in the league this year?
I think the only thing that Tua needs to be concerned about is his ankle, because he did get shaken up yesterday too. When I thought for a second he was going to be done for the day, but he did come back out. Fortunately, he led them to a victory. That's 2 weeks in a row. Last week they beat my Ravens, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But no, Tua, I think even when you talk about early MVPs, which is still too early, don't count him out because he has improved. He has the weapons. First of all, he has the offensive line. You have the fastest man in the league with Tyreek Hill, and you have one of the fastest men, his former teammate, with Jalen Waddle too. So clearly, they are able to compete against good teams, very good, Buffalo, Baltimore, and they could be a very dangerous team in the playoffs also.
I'm just glad to see Tua silence the critics. I think Dolphins fans who have been just long suffering like a lot of teams we're not sold on Tua, and I think clearly right now he's their guy. Fins up in Miami, all behind Tua, and yes, I mean he could be a little bit fragile. I'm concerned about the concussion that he suffered yesterday, or the ding that he got, and coming back. You never know how those things ultimately impact a player. I understand that the Players Association is asking for a review of the protocol that allowed him to come back. So you never know what's going to happen. You wish him nothing but the best, but I'm glad to see that he has silenced the critics and solidified himself as not just the top player, not the starting quarterback in Miami, but a legitimate candidate for our way to early MVP talk. But before we leave this game, I've got to look at and talk about and hear your take on the best picture of the week. I mean, you see these guys go at each other. Sometimes there's fights, sometimes there's this, but at the end of this game, as the players for Buffalo and Miami were leaving the field, you had this amazing photograph of Tua and Josh Allen, not just hugging, but at one point, Allen just put his head on Tua's shoulders. I had to just talk about this, and I posted it and called it Warriors Respect. What was your take when you saw them do that and you see this photo?
Well, it was a tough loss for Josh Allen because he did so much, but they were struggling. Nobody likes to lose, especially when you are a true competitor. You're talking about two young quarterbacks in the game in the AFC. Josh Allen, even for the last 3 years, being one of the best top 5 quarterbacks in the league, possibly MVP this year. Tua, now he's starting to have a good season. He just silenced the critics. Obviously, still has a long way to go, but this is also representation of the future of the NFL, which really is the present. But just even going 10 years or more from now, these guys will still hopefully be the face of the NFL, with Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, the list goes on.
If you didn't see the end of that game, you got to go watch it. I mean, it was total chaos. Buffalo was out of timeouts. They were trying to get out of bounds. They couldn't get out of bounds. They were trying to get set up for a play to try to kick a field goal, and time ran out before they could run the play. You got to go to my Instagram page and catch the video of the offensive coordinator reacting. When he saw that happen, he picked up all the papers. He threw his headphone down and threw his papers over the camera. So I love that they captured that. Thanks, I believe that was on CBS for doing that. But that was a great human reaction. But man, he was not happy. So you can catch that over on my Instagram page at RoySJ. All right, so let's talk about your guy, Lamar Jackson. I mean, he had 218 passing yards, 106 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. He became the first guy in NFL history to have touchdowns of 75 plus yards in a single game, both rushing and passing, in this 37-26 win over New England. Tell me a little bit about, I know this is your team and this is your guy. Yeah. Did you enjoy this one?
I would have if I watched it, especially against the Patriots too. They didn't show it in my area, so I missed it. I would have loved it if I did, or I would have enjoyed it, especially coming off of the loss from last week to Miami. And I know, again, that was last week, so we can't really get into the details about that. But just to come back and get a good win victory over a team like New England, who are still a good team with the greatest coach of all time and Bill Belichick, with a young quarterback and Mac Jones, still having a defense which gave Lamar trouble. Lamar definitely got the pressure on him, underthrew a couple of balls, did get a sack too, but he also rushed for a touchdown too, which is his strength. The athleticism, running is always going to be a strength, so you're always going to have to focus on containing him. But the throws that he was able to get, he got it to Mark Andrews, through another pass, it has improved. If you look at his numbers, his percentage, his arm has improved. I mean, he completed 18 of 29 passes yesterday, and that was a total of 218 yards with mixing up his legs. That's a lot, though. That is a lot. If he is able to continue to play like that, even though we're going to face tougher opponents as well. New England, they are a good team, but, trying to play the Chiefs again. If he's able to do that, you're not just going to stack the box. You're not just going to be able to just contain him, because now, okay, he's going to get some passes off too. We can be a very good, dangerous team. The only thing, though, is injuries. I think that is the only problem, because we lost a tackle yesterday too, unfortunately. So, which is hopefully we don't have the same thing that happened last year. We had 17 injuries. But
all right, now I'm not going to let this slide. You said Bill Belichick, greatest NFL coach of all time. I know some Vince Lombardi fans might argue with you. You might even throw some Don Shula folks in there, and folks like me love Bill Walsh, but certainly he's not in that top three. Yeah. So why do you think that Belichick is the greatest coach of all time?
Not just the fact that he had arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, but I think everybody knows the mindset, the mastermind that he is. The only thing right now is him being questioned as an offensive coach, because obviously the defense is there. We already know that, but I think the offense is the challenge. But six with New England, because he has more championships, not just with them, but just 6 there, being a part of that dynasty. That is probably the main reason, because most of these other coaches don't even have 5 or 4.
So you mentioned the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady, of course, who's now in Tampa Bay. As we've talked about, he retired before the start of the season, but then unretired. Yesterday, when they were playing Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers, and they lost 14-12, there were times when Brady got hit, when Brady was in there, when they would get a close-up on his face, he had to be wondering, what am I doing out here? I mean, he didn't have a horrible game, but he's been frustrated over the last couple of weeks, as we know. And you mentioned this last week. He broke something on the sidelines, and now the NFL is instituting a rule where they're going to penalize players for destroying NFL property on the sidelines. So let's put Brady in perspective. We heard, I think it was prior to the game, if they're going to give him the geezer day off, the veteran day off. They're going to give him Wednesdays off. Just to give him a personal day during the season. I'm sure it's a smart thing to do for him physically and mentally, and probably just to keep his marriage intact, because we've heard from Giselle and how she's not been happy about him coming back. What this does in the locker room will remain to be seen. But after the game, you sent this great graphic of showing his frustration. It had this great sign in the background, should have stayed retired. So what do you think? Do you think Tom Brady is going to make it to the end of this season? Or is this going to ultimately force him to step away before the end of the year?
It's hard for me to say. The reason why he got hit so many times is because he has injuries to his offensive line. You had third string linemen, and you had a rookie center who doesn't even play center. So those things, you play without Mike Evans, your best receiver. He was suspended because of the New Orleans fight. Julio Jones was out. So you had your top 3 receivers out. So I'm surprised, and I think everybody's surprised that it was 14-12. So I'll give him his credit, because like you said, he did not have a horrible game. And usually when he's about to get sacked, he usually goes down to avoid those hits. But it's hard to say because I know he has the competitor still, the mindset is still there, but the age though, his body's telling him something else clearly, which is why he has the Wednesdays off, which really is not fair. But it's like you're choosing to still play, that is on you. However, so it's not fair because if he wasn't this old, he probably would not get that extra day off. So I think some teammates are going to be looking at him sideways. Some who stood up for him in that fight and backed him up probably are going to understand. So I don't think it's going to divide the locker room. I think it just may be a little something. But it's hard to say, is he going to last? Are they going to make it to the playoffs? Depending when those linemen come back, you know, the rest of the receivers come back whenever Julio comes back. I know Mike Evans, like I said, it was just a 1-game suspension, which I don't even think was necessary because I don't think he threw any punches. It was just push and shove that didn't need to go there. Again, on the goal line, you could have ran it to Leonard Fournette as opposed to try to throw it, but it's hard to run when you don't really have a good offensive line at that. But we'll see. But 271 pass yards, a TD, I'll give him his credit for that.
And you know, he's got that 45-year-old body, but his mind is somewhere in his 20s, and the mind forgets that body is still 45 years old. That happens to me sometimes in the gym too. I forget that the 66-year-old body, but we keep pushing. I think he will continue to try to push through if his mind can handle the challenges. I think that
his marriage though, that's a factor for him too. Right. So that trying to juggle that too, and I think we have seen that. Also, clearly that's gonna be on his mind. That's gonna be a distraction for him too. So I think he finally just decide, you know what, for the sake of my marriage, I've done this for years. Hopefully, you can finally put down the cleats and do what Serena did.
So we hinted at this today. We're gonna go into the way too early MVP conversation. So who is your pick for NFL MVP in this way too early juncture of 3 games?
I'm obviously going to pick Lamar Jackson, Ravens quarterback. I'm going to pick him. He keeps making history. And I think what people keep forgetting is every year there is improvement, though, whether it's individual or team-wise. Even last year, too, despite having a bad year with 17 injuries, we beat the Chiefs for the first time. So that's one thing right there. Also, now we just have to see. Hopefully, we just have to continue to improve, get closer to winning a Super Bowl. But this man is electrifying, and you don't want to put him in the top 10. So Dak Prescott apparently is a top 10 quarterback over him. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't know whose list that is, but yeah, that's your guy. So I'm gonna go with Jalen Hurts. Right? Here's a guy who, in a sense, like Tua, was not on totally solid ground with Philadelphia fans. As we've all seen with Jalen since he began at Alabama, he has a different kind of game. He's not the classic, 6-foot+ drop back quarterback. So it has taken Philadelphia a while to embrace him. This young man is one of the hardest working people in the game, if not the hardest, and he listens, he's humble, and whatever he can do to try to improve, he does, and he has really established himself as Philadelphia's quarterback. They're 3-0. He's got 916 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 157 yards rushing, and most important, he owns that locker room right now. I mean, there is nobody on that team who doesn't believe that Jalen Hurts is not their leader now and for the foreseeable future. So I know it's way too early. You got your guy Lamar. I've got Jalen Hurts. Tua's like, hey, what about me? What about me? So we will revisit this about every 3 or 4 games to see how our respective picks are doing. Great candidates this year for MVP. Finally, what was the biggest news coming out of the NFL this week? That the Super Bowl halftime show in 2023 will be none other than Rihanna. All right, that got folks buzzing. That got folks talking about the Super Bowl. It's still one of the biggest showcases for any artist. So it is great to see that she will be performing, and I'm certain that will keep eyes glued onto the screen during the Super Bowl in February of 2023. All right, young man, it was great to catch up with you on this. Looking forward to doing it again. until next time, what do we tell people to do?
Keep balling.
That's right. See you next time. Bye-bye.